E aí galera, eu sou a Júlia, o LOKAOS e o Rock Forever estão aqui hoje para entrevistar o Eddie Truck, que é o apresentador do Death Metal Show e foi um grande radialista do rock. Hey Eddie, how are you liking Brazil?
It's wonderful. It's great to finally be here and to visit this country. For so long I've heard from so many rock fans about how much they love that metal show, and I've met many of them that have come to America to see tapings, and I always said to them, one day I will come, and it's great to finally be here.
It's great to have you here. In '86, you were hired for Megaforce Records, and they had already released Metallica and Anthrax. How did you get in there?
Well, I started doing a radio show in 1983 that focused all on heavy metal music. And at that time, the owner of Megaforce Records, Johnny Z, came to my radio studio, and he said to me, I have this band that no one will play on the radio called Metallica. And he pulled out a copy of Kill 'Em All. And he said, will you please play this on the radio? And I said, okay, I'll try it. And I played it. And that night when he left, he said to me, if I can ever get Metallica to be a big band, and I can ever get success, I'm going to hire you to work for my record company. Okay. And a couple of years later, in 1986, Metallica was huge, and he called me up and he said, I now have a big record company and I want you to come work for me. And I said, okay. So I went to work for him, and the first thing I did was release Kill 'Em All on CD, because CDs were new at the time, and also did Anthrax Fistful of Metal on CD, which was new at the time, and became a part of this record label. And I signed Ace Frehley and King's X and a few other bands, and it was a great experience.
So you're kind of a trendsetter.
Well, I don't know. My radio show, which is 30 years old this year, is where everything kind of came from for me. It's where I started. It's where everything came from as far as, it all kind of sprung off of my radio show. So I was one of the first people to do a radio show that was focused on heavy metal music. So yes, in that regard, it was all about me trying to take the music that I love and let other people hear it and spread this music to more people. That's what it's always been about. Still to this day, the same thing. Let more people know, grow this, make it bigger, make it better.
About Ace Frehley, one of the great things you did in Megaforce was bringing Ace Frehley after he got out of Kiss. How did you do that?
Well, I was a huge fan of the original lineup of Kiss, and they were one of my favorite bands. When I started working for Megaforce, I said to Johnny, I said, I love all these heavy metal bands that we have. At the time, Anthrax, Metallica, Manowar, Testament, Overkill. I said, but I'd like to find a band that we could also maybe get played on the radio, and that is more of a hard rock band, because I love that as well. And as a result, I said, being such a big Kiss fan, I said, Ace Frehley is out there. Nobody knows what he's doing or where he is. We should track him down, because there's a big audience. People want to know about him. So we tracked him down through the producer, which was Eddie Kramer, and we had lunch, and Johnny wanted to sign him, and we signed him, and the rest is history.
That's really cool. I'm really sorry. I came up with the questions 15 minutes ago, so
okay.
I have to read them.
You're doing great.
Thank you. In the radio, you had some pretty fun stories with Guns N' Roses, like when Mike Piazza went in your show in 2003, and you played IRS. Actually, when Axl went there in 2006 as well, was Axl really mad with you about IRS, or how was to host him in your show after that?
Well, Mike Piazza is an American baseball player, for people that don't know. He was a very popular baseball player at the time, and he's one of my best friends to this day. But Axl was mad at him, not me. And as a result, Mike was a huge fan of Guns N' Roses. He wasn't even sure if the song was real, and we played it, and it turned out that it was real. But Axl coming into my studio, nobody knew it. Nobody knew it was going to happen. It was not planned. It just happened. One day he just walked in. He started It was actually happened because Sebastian Bach was in my studio, and he started to text Sebastian, who hadn't heard from him in like 13 years. And then one thing led to another, and suddenly there's Axl sitting in our studio doing his first interview in 15 years. And we had a great night, and we talked, and we had fun. Afterwards, we went out to a club. We had a great time. So I've never had anything but good experiences with Axl. I've only had a few experiences, but they've all been good. But it's a very long story how it all came to be. But him coming into my radio studio was not planned at all. It just happened because he started to text Sebastian, and Sebastian said, hey, actually, like Sebastian would say, dude, we're around the corner, come and hang out. And he came and hung out.
So another question. It took you some time to have your own exclusive hard heavy TV show. How did you come up with the idea for TMS?
Well, what many people don't know is that I worked for VH1 Classic long before that metal show. I was a host, a VJ, interviewer. I did all kinds of music. I went all over the world and interviewed rock bands. But back then it was very scripted and very much, here's how you have to ask questions and here's what we want you to ask. And way back then I would say to the producers, let me do a show like I want to do. Let me talk how I want to talk. Let me have the guests I want to have on. And no. Then finally around 2007, they said, okay, let's talk about this idea you have. So I went in and I had a meeting, and we discussed the idea, and we went through a lot of changes, a lot of different people involved in a lot of different ideas. And then in 2008, we shot the first test episode, the pilot, as they call it, and the network loved it. It was picked up. I introduced the network to Don and Jim, who are friends of mine, who are my co-hosts. I said, these are great friends of mine who also love the music. We have a great time together. We have a great chemistry because we knew each other before. Let us do our thing. And they did. And here we are 5 years and more than 100 episodes later, still doing it. So I'm very lucky and thankful. And for me, it's amazing to know that the show is popular in a place like Brazil, because we don't know where the show is going on outside of America. We just hear from fans that it's on there, and to be able to come here and see fans firsthand is great. So I'm so glad I was able to finally do it, but it's been incredible, so lucky to continue to be doing shows. But it all started because I had worked for the network before, and I was doing this radio show, and I was already known as a metal host, and then they just gave me the opportunity to do my own show.
We're all so fucking thankful you did it.
Thank you.
In the last years, many hard heavy metal bands came up, especially in Europe. Do you know any of these bands? What's your favorite band of all of them?
Well, not so much Europe, but for me, I just like bands that I like. I don't care where they're from. To me, it has to be something that my ear picks up on that I like. I don't care about trends. I don't care if it makes me look cool or not if I like them. I never did. 30 years doesn't matter to me. I can only be honest, and if it moves me and it's something I love, I love. So as far as new bands, there are new bands that I heard that I like recently that sound like they're new bands, but they sound like old bands. For instance, there's a band from Texas called Scorpion Child. They just put out their first record. I like them a lot. There's a band from Los Angeles called Rival Sons. Just put out their first record. I like them a lot. There's a number of bands that have an old school sound, but they're new bands that I like a lot. And then another band that I actually had a hand in assembling is a new band, but they're made up of older guys, and that's the Winery Dogs, which was an idea that I had to put Richie Kotzen in that band, who I was a big fan of. So whenever I can do something like that, it means a lot to me, because the whole reason I got into the music is to help bands that I love and to spread the word. So that's an example of being able to do that. But I listen and I like new bands, but they have to sound like the things that I like from the past. If I'm not going to ever pretend I like a band just because it's the cool band. I have to be honest.
You have to be true to your heart with rock and roll.
When I was in high school and I was young, I wasn't in the popular crowd. I didn't get any dates, nothing, because I was just into the music I liked. And I wouldn't pretend to like music I didn't like. I had to be honest. It had to be truthful.
So you were a weirdo in high school?
A little bit of a nerd, as they say. A little bit of a nerd. Yeah.
I have a last question for you, and this is kind of a long one. You just released the second part of your book, and you talk about some bands that today they're not this what we're talking about, the bands who are popular and make a huge success. Do you believe that releasing the second part of the album, you'll get like the guys who didn't grow up listening to these bands and a new set of fans to those bands?
Yeah, well, with the new book that just came out, Volume 2, I was able to feature some bands that I wasn't able to include in the first book that are very popular bands, but also some bands that were not so popular from the 70s and 80s. And one of the first reactions I've heard from people about the new book is that there are certain bands in there that they weren't really aware of, but they read about, and now they like and they want to learn about, and they're listening to their music and they're discovering through my books. That's also great, because that is, again, the reason why I do it, to expose music. I love exposing music, whether it's new bands or old bands that people never heard of or didn't know about. Walking through Manifesto tonight, 2 people came up to me and said, I listened to UFO because of you. That means a lot to me. You too. So that means a lot to me. And that's a band that's over 40 years old. But people now, younger people like yourself, are discovering them. So that's just as important to me as people that will say, I listened to Scorpion Child because I heard them on your radio show. So the new stuff, and there's plenty of old bands that need the help too. And I do the best I can with the time that I have. But whether it's through the books, I do 2 radio shows in the US, or through that metal show, or my website, or whatever it is, helping to grow the scene and the bands is what it's always been about, but also treating it respectfully. You know, I love the bands and I want to treat them respectfully, and I don't want to be a cliche. I want to make sure that they get a good interview and that they get the respect they deserve. Because I think a lot more people like this music than it's given credit for.
Well, it's an honor, and you're an inspiration. I'm so glad I got to talk to you. Can I have a hug? Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and best of luck to you, because you're the younger people that will keep this all going, so thank you.
Galera,
Let me try that again. Obrigado.
Galera, eu sou a Júlia, esse é o Ari Truck, e a gente está aqui no Manifesto hoje. So, you want to say anything to the people watching you?
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the support for what I do. I appreciate it. I really, really appreciate it. Great to finally be here in Brazil and in Sao Paulo. And thank you for all the love and support. And truly, rock and roll is alive here, which is great to see.
Long live rock and roll.
Long live.